Donc, on va reprendre. Bienvenue pour cette nouvelle session. Donc, c'est une session à laquelle j'accorde beaucoup d'importance également parce qu'elle fait beaucoup de sens, fait partie d'un cheminement
So we're
également
going to
personnel à
come
côté du
back.
professionnel.
Welcome to this
Donc, je
third
suis infiniment
session, which
reconnaissante
makes a
à
lot of
Leslie Clou,
sense.
qui est
It is
responsable
part
scientifique de la ligne
also
Peuple
of
autochtone.
my
On s'est rencontrés
personal
un peu tardivement à notre goût, mais on s'est rencontrés, c'est le
journey
principal.
as
Elle a
well. So I
magnifiquement
would like to thank
animé cette
Leslie
ligne depuis
Klou,
1 an
who
et
is
demi.
responsible
Donc,
of
ce
the
que je vais
Indigenous
faire, c'est que je
Peoples
vais vous
line.
présenter dans un premier
She
temps les premiers
really
travaux
greatly
qui ont été
contributed to
menés dans
this
cette
line
ligne
for the
chère
past year and a half. So
ligne Peuple
first of all,
autochtone,
I'm going to
et
introduce, to
vous
present the
montrer à
first
l'écran
works
la
that were
première mission que nous avons
made within
réalisée en
this Indigenous
Colombie.
Peoples
À
line.
l'origine,
And I will
Luis
show
Miguel
you on the
Gutierrez
screen
est
the
en
first
charge de la
mission we
ligne justice
organized
transitionnelle.
in
Le
Colombia.
professeur Victor
So
Tafour, qui
originally,
est en charge
Luis
du
Miguel, who was in
programme
charge
de
of the
diplomatie
Transitional
juridique environnementale à
Justice
l'université de
line,
Pace
and Professor
University,
Victor
qui
Tafour,
est,
who is in charge
qui est vraiment à l'avant-garde de toute
the
l'expérience en termes
environmental
de diplomatie
justice
scientifique, et
line,
qui est colombien.
who is
Pour tout vous dire,
really
son
a
père
pioneer
était
in
élu
all these
et a
experiences in
été
terms of
assassiné sous
scientific
ses yeux.
diplomacy,
Donc
and
c'était
he's from
une
Colombia.
mission qui
And
était
he's
forte en
actually, his
signification
father was
que d'aller en Colombie
elected,
avec
and
ce
he was
message de paix
assassinated in
avec
front
la
of his own
terre, en
eyes.
présence de
So
Victor
it was
Tafour,
a very
de Luis Miguel
strong
Gutierrez, qui depuis est
mission to
nommé
come
maître
to
de conférence
Colombia
en droit
to
public à
bring this
l'université de
message of
Poitiers,
peace
que je
in the
remercie
presence of Victor
profondément, qui est
Tafour.
également
And there
colombien
is
de
also a
nationalité.
professor at the University of
Et
Poitiers
vous allez
who is
entendre, j'aimerais
also from
donner, comme vous l'avez
Colombia.
compris, je tiens à donner la parole
And
toujours à la
you will
jeunesse, puisque
also
c'est une chaire
hear
intergénérationnelle, avec les ambassadeurs, les jeunes
to give
générations
the
et les
floor to
pionniers, donc les
youth,
pionniers
because
de
this
la
is
génération du
a
professeur Michel Prieur, Edith Brunweiss, Nicolas
transgenerational
Robinson, Sonia
chair, a
Guza, des
transgenerational
ambassadeurs qui sont un peu
um,
les petits, on se prend comme jeunes,
team.
les
So we
graines qui
have
sont en
the
train de travailler,
pioneers
et
such as
surtout la prochaine
Nick
génération des élèves
Robinson,
et
Edith
pour qui on donne du
Brandweiss.
temps.
We have the
Claudia Pineda
pioneers,
était la
and we
première
have the next
assistante de la
generation, our
chaire. Elle devait
students.
même
So
réaliser sa
Claudia
thèse sous ma
Pineda was
direction
the
pour la
first
chaire.
assistant
La vie aurait
of the
décidé
chair,
autrement, mais c'est la raison pour
and
laquelle je
she
viens
conducted
avant
her
tout à lui donner la
thesis
parole
under my
en premier
direction.
pour ouvrir cette session. Elle va vous parler de cette mission
Life
en Colombie.
decided otherwise for
Claudia
her, but I would
Pineda
like to
Concha.
give her the floor, and she's going to tell us about her mission in Colombia. So,
Muy buenos
Claudia
días,
Pineda.
mi nombre es Claudia. Les cuento que fui la primera asistente de la Cátedra de Normandía por la Paz hace ya un tiempo.
Hello, my name is
Y
Claudia.
además de
I
felicitar
was
el
the
trabajo de
first
la cátedra en
assistant
los
of the
últimos
Normandy
años y
Chair for
conmemorar el final de
Peace
este ciclo con
uh,
ustedes,
a while
quisiera
back,
hablarles en
quite
esta
a long
ocasión
time
en
ago, and I would
particular
like to
de una misión
congratulate
importante en la cual
the works of the
trabajé y colaboré con la
chair
cátedra, que
in
es la misión de
recent year,
Colombia.
and I would like to talk to you
Esta
about a
misión
very
tenía por
important
objetivo
mission on
avanzar en
which
la
I
línea de legitimación de
collaborated
justicia
with the
transicional y
Normandy Chair
pueblos
for Peace. This is
originarios
the
en el
Colombia
terreno.
mission,
Fue un enriquecedor viaje científico
whose
dirigido
aim
por
was
Emily
to
Gaillard en
advance the
2020.
transitional
Una muy
justice and
provechosa
indigenous peoples
ocasión
line of
para
research in
nuestro
the
equipo
field.
de
And
poder
this
avanzar en
was an
nuestros
advance
trabajos,
which was
ya que el
conducted by
escenario en
Emily
Colombia
Gaillard in
era muy fértil para
2020.
este tipo
This
de
was a very
investigación,
useful opportunity
tanto por la
for our
historia que
team
tiene el
to
conflicto
advance
interno
our
desde el país,
work,
como por
because
el
this was a very,
desarrollo
very
de la
fertile
construcción
scenario for this
de una
type of
sociedad más justa sobre acuerdos
research.
de paz,
And because of our history of
desarrollo
internal
de educación
conflict,
para la
and for the
paz, de
construction
una
of a
cultura de
fairer
paz en toda la
society
sociedad en
based on
Colombia
the peace
y por el gran número de
agreements
actores que en la
and the
comunidad
development of
trabajan por este
peace
propósito en Colombia.
education, to create a culture
Dentro de
of
los
peace
actores
within
importantes
society
eran
in
especialmente
Colombia.
destacados los
And
pueblos
a
autóctonos
large
y
number
su
of
rol
actors are
clave en
currently
promover paz
working
con la
for this
tierra.
goal in Colombia.
Entonces, en el
Among
contexto de la
these
importancia de la
stakeholders, we
tierra
must
en el conflicto
underline
armado
the
que
role of
abarcaba los
indigenous
últimos
peoples and
60
their
años
effort
en
in
este país.
promoting peace with the earth.
Para establecer
The earth was a
colaboraciones
key
científicas en
element
Colombia,
during
vimos
the
el
armed
poder de
conflict that
reunirnos con
marked
diferentes
Colombia
actores
in
clave en la
the
materia.
past 6
Por
decades.
ejemplo,
In
pudimos
order to
reunir
establish
con la
scientific
magistrada
collaborations in
Claudia
Colombia, we had the
Rodríguez,
honor of meeting with
reconocida
different key actors
internacionalmente por sus
in the
aportes en
field. We were
derecho
able
ambiental
to meet
y quien
the
trabaja en ese
magistrate,
entonces
the
en la
Judge Gloria
Jurisdicción
Amparo
Especial
Rodriguez, who
para
is
la Paz
internationally
en Bogotá.
recognized for her contributions to the
También nos
environmental
reunimos
and
con la Oficina
international law.
Nacional de la
who was working
para discutir los
at
temas
the
de paz,
time at the
justicia
Special
transicional y
Jurisdiction for
colonial
Peace in
en
Bogota.
Colombia.
We also
Con la
met with the
ONG de
National
Justicia,
Office of the
un actor
Ombudsman,
clave en la defensa de
the
los derechos de la
Ombudsman for the
generación
people, to
futura,
discuss issues of peace,
con el decano
transitional
de la
justice,
Facultad
and
de Derecho
environment
de la
in
Universidad
Colombia. We were
Nacional
able
de
to meet with
Colombia,
the NGO
el
De
señor
Justicia,
Fernando Torres,
which is a
colegas
key
investigadores
player
con
in the
quienes pudimos
defense of the rights
profundizar
of
aún
future
más
generations.
temas
We
de
were
ciencia
also able
política,
to meet
de
with the
derecho,
Dean of the
de
Faculty of
ecología
Law
política, entre
at the
otros, y sus
National University
interacciones
of Colombia,
pudo
and we were
escadriñar
also
información.
able to meet with colleagues and
Por otro lado,
researchers
entre otras
and
reuniones,
discuss
intercambios con
topics
países
of
de
political
laboratorio de
science,
estudios
law, and
andinos en
political
Colombia,
ecology,
el
amongst
Instituto de las
others. We were
Américas y
able
su polo
also
andino,
to
la Embajada de
meet
Francia en Colombia,
with
entre otros.
the French Institute of
Todos
Andean
actores que nos
Studies
dieron
in
una
Colombia
perspectiva
and
útil
the
para el
Institute of the
encuentro.
Americas,
Además,
Andean Pole, and the French
stakeholders
Embassy in Colombia,
y
amongst
así
others.
poder
So
tejer
all of
una
these
red
were
de
players
colaboración
which gave us a
científica
very
de la
useful
más alta
perspective
calidad.
during our meetings.
Nuestra coordinadora
And
general conoció además al pueblo originario Kogi, que habitan en el norte
in
de
order to
Colombia.
create a
Esta
network
fue
of
sin duda
scientific
una
cooperation
maravillosa
of very high
experiencia para
quality,
comprender de primera
our
mano los
representatives
efectos
were
que la
able to
cátedra desarrolló
meet
en su trabajo de los
with
últimos
the
años.
Kogi
En
people who
pocas
live
palabras,
in
para
the
no
north of
quitarles más
Colombia.
tiempo,
This
quisiera
was
decirles
an
que creo
experience,
firmemente que
a
esta misión,
first-hand
ejemplo de la
experience to
capacidad de
see,
creación de
to
redes
assess the
internacionales de la
impact of the
cátedra,
works of the chair
de
in
su
the past few
potencial
years.
para la internacionalización de
And
las
this chair,
investigaciones y de su
with
espíritu,
its
siempre a la
ability to
vanguardia con
create an
temáticas que están en el
international
corazón
network,
de
its
los desafíos
potential for
planeteros.
internationalization of the
Muchísimas gracias
research,
por su
and because
tiempo.
of its very
Deseo muchísimo éxito también a
pioneering
cada una de
spirit
las maravillosas
with the
personas
topics that are
que
at the
hizo este
heart
inspirador
of
trabajo posible
today's
y
world.
que
The work of the chair
hicieron
is
también de
very
mi
important,
experiencia en la
very
cátedra
significant. I would like to
una
thank
muy
each and every
linda e
one of you, and I would like to
inolvidable
thank
experiencia que
all of
guardo
the people who
hasta el día
made
de
this
hoy
work
en mis
possible
recuerdos y mi corazón.
and
Saludos
who
a todos y
made
a todas
my
y que siga siendo un
experience at the
provechosa
Normandy Chair
charla para ustedes.
for peace an unforgettable experience. Thank you very much. I hope this day today will be very useful to all of you. I am very emotional to see Claudia here on the screen.
Alors, je vais faire une petite intercession, du coup, en parlant des travaux de Laetitia
I
et
would
Luis
like
Miguel Gutiérrez dans le
to
cadre de la
now
ligne
talk
peuple
about
dans
the
le cadre de la
work
ligne
of
justice
Laetitia and
transitionnelle
Luis
et
Miguel Gutierrez
justice
from the
environnementale.
Indigenous
J'ai
Peoples
quelques
Line and
diapositives à vous
Transitional
présenter.
Justice Line and Environmental Justice Line. So just a few slides I wanted to show you.
Pour contextualiser, donc Luis Miguel Gutiérrez est la personne qui était en charge de la ligne justice transitionnelle et
So
justice
Luis Miguel
environnementale,
Gutierrez was
qui
the
est très
person in
innovateur aussi.
charge
On
of the
parle de justice
Indigenous
transitionnelle, on
Peoples
pense
Line
beaucoup à
and
réparer les hommes et les
Transitional
peuples, mais là il
Justice
s'agit
Line. This
plutôt
is a
de
very
réparer
innovative
les
concept. We talk a
territoires
lot about
qui ont été
repairing
victimes
human
des
beings,
conflits.
repairing people, but this is also a way
Donc,
of
je vais prendre la
repairing
parole au nom de
territories,
Laetitia
victims of
Braconnier-Moreno,
conflicts.
qui a
So
travaillé
now
avec
I would
Luis
like
Miguel
to
Gutiérrez
take
dans
the
le cadre de
floor
cette ligne, pour
in
sa
the
direction.
name of
Elle,
Laetitia
elle est souffrante aujourd'hui.
Braconnier-Moreno, who
Je voulais
worked with
présenter une
Luis Miguel
vidéo, mais elle nous a
Gutierrez under
présenté donc un
his
document que je vais vous
direction.
lire.
She
Ils ont
will
réalisé tous les
present,
deux,
she wanted to present a
et
video
on
today,
va
but
avoir
she's
son historique. Ils
actually
ont
going
réalisé
to
tous les
present
deux
a
deux
document which I'm going
webinaires
to read to you.
avec,
And
je
they
vais
have conducted 2 webinars. I don't have it here on the screen.
c'est ici. Comme je n'avais pas prévu d'intervenir maintenant. Ils ont donc coordonné 2 webinaires au sein de la chaire avec des représentants de peuples autochtones
So
pour
they
parler
have
des mécanismes de
coordinated 2
justice
webinars
transitionnelle en
within the
Colombie et
chair
dans quelle mesure les
with
territoires
representatives
étaient
of
réparés
indigenous
grâce
people in order to
à la
talk about the
participation des peuples
transitional
autochtones dans
justice
l'élaboration des
mechanisms
mécanismes
in
de justice
Colombia and
transitionnelle.
how the territories were
À l'issue
repaired thanks to the participation of indigenous peoples through these mechanisms of justice, transitional justice. So they've organized 2 webinars which are online on this website of the Normandy Chair for Peace. The videos are online in the Transitional Justice and Environmental Justice line in the Normandy Chair for Peace website. They have also actually made up a booklet, published a booklet on this.
Page donc de ce livret qui va bientôt être publié par la chaire. Ce livret est le fruit de rencontres et de
which will soon be published by the chair. This booklet is the result of meetings and concerns that arose before the COVID-19 pandemic. At the time, Colombia was going through a very critical moment after the hopes raised by the peace agreement reached between the Colombian state and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, the FARC, in 2016. Indeed, the measures aimed at acting on the causes of the conflict have not been duly implemented by the national government from 2018 to 2022. As a result of the power vacuum left by the FARC and the government's inability to establish an institutional presence at a local level, other armed actors have emerged and begun to compete for the control of the territory. So after the peace accord, in that context, the rural, ethnic and peasant populations then experienced disproportionate upsurge of violence marked by assassinations targeting social leaders and forced displacement, confinement, and recruitment by armed groups. The disharmony caused by the war has affected the cultural, economic, and spiritual ties that indigenous peoples, in particular, had with the territories. In order to understand the resurgence of conflict in their ethnic territories and to draw attention of the academic world and public opinion to the situation, researchers and members of 3 organizations, the Colombian National Commission for Indigenous Territories, the Normandy Chair of Excellence for Peace, and the Institute for the Americas have embarked on a process of reflection involving speakers from a wide range of backgrounds. With the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing lockdown measures, the planned seminar could not take place face-to-face. In that context, the CNTI's Observatory on the Territorial Rights of Indigenous Peoples then proposed 2 French research organizations, offered them the possibility to take part in 2 exchanges, 2 discussions that were broadcasted online called the Knowledge Dialogues, which were finally organized in July and August 2021. So the topic was peace, environment, and the rights of nature in the post-peace agreement for the first meeting. And so the first webinar was broadcasted, and the second webinar dealt with the challenges of building territorial peace and indigenous resistance. This explains that according to the successive peace-building mechanisms, these different discussions had to adopt a very transcultural approach with different speakers, with different knowledge systems. This is something that was also mentioned in a different webinar. She explains that peace is only possible if we go through a complete rural transformation and a consolidation of the indigenous justice, indigenous legal systems. She explains that thanks to the recommendations of the indigenous movement, these mechanisms need to be reinforced. So all of these elements are mentioned in the book. And as a conclusion, she says that this document aims at keeping a trace of this experience. So the work of transcription and debates really aimed at exploring this. The result is a polyphonic account of a little explored issue of the consolidation of the rights of indigenous peoples to their territories through transitional justice measures. Beyond the official discourse on these measures, this book aims at showing that their application depends on the different the political situations and the different conceptual possibilities considered in transitional justice and territorial peace. So thank you very much, Laetitia. I would like to show you the slide. This is the second page. So we were mentioning, we talked about also some illustrations. All of this was illustrated thanks to representatives of indigenous peoples in order to validate their knowledge. Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to Émilie so that we continue with our journey, our traveling through Colombia with the Kogi people. Thank you very much. So this booklet is already available in Spanish. It'll be downloadable on the website, and we're now translating it into French. We won't have time to translate it into English, but this is just to show you, you know, this mission in Colombia was a strong highlight, a departure point of the research that is done in the field. You know, so several players took part. You saw people from the Faculty of Law at Bogota, the University of Bogota. There are other photos we will show you to show you also some people from the high administration, the defense of human rights. Here you have all the team here present. And the idea was that when we present the Normandy Chair for Peace and we support this project of peace with the earth, we raise awareness on the necessity and the need to strengthen the responsibilities, the transitional justice, and the major role played by indigenous peoples. And here in Bogota, they had a board game on transitional justice in order to make this transitional justice process much more democratic and much more popular in Colombia. So there was this idea of creating games to highlight, to illustrate peace with the earth. And the third, defense of human rights. We don't have the photo here, but the judge, magistrate Maria Julia Amparo, who is very respected and honored woman for the movement of peace. So the idea was to come back to the field. Of course, COVID pandemic, of course, went through that, but all the seeds yielded something very strong. And Normandy was really a territory for experimenting with all the different lines, all the different research lines of the Normandy Chair for Peace. And the second week of our mission in Colombia with Luis Miguel Gutierrez, we were associated with a UNESCO mission, and we went to the Yogi territory in two sacred sites, one located near the sea and another one in the within more in the continent. So here you see the specificity of the Kogi people is that you can take the floor and you can be listened to as long as you want. You don't have to, they don't count how much you speak. You don't have to also be face to face and look at the person in their eyes. What really is important is the quality of the listening process. So this also gave way to a time of focus with Éric Julien at the MRSH. So focus in Colombia with a focus on the Kogi people. Éric Julien has been working for 37 years with the Kogi people, and he has worked with his association to acquire their lands so that they can live in peace in their territories. And he came here to the MRSH to really tell us more about the cosmogony and the Kogi people, and we were able to dedicate a highlight to this, and I was very proud to organize it following this experience in the field in Colombia. So, you know, we took advantage of this COVID period to really launch this field research, and with Eric Julien Joe Baker have now written an article on the new legal action based on the laws of nature, which will be published in a different line of research. So following this traveling in Colombia, we wanted to also create some traveling, some pedagogical and educational kits, because we thought that in France we don't have much education into indigenous peoples. For example, the Kanak. Do we know their systems? I was very lucky because I went to visit French Polynesia, and you know, this very, very strong connection they have with their territory. We don't know anything about this. So the students participated into a moot court conducted by Tony Oposa. Some educational kits were created and launched, and we wanted to go even further with the Normandy Chair for Peace. And now I would like to give the floor to Agathe Neveu, former student at the campus of Rennes, and she had contributed to the first project, and then there was a second project, but we could not actually start it because of COVID. But I would like to give the floor to Agathe Neveu. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup pour cette invitation. Ça me fait énormément plaisir de revenir à Caen après 2 années depuis que je suis diplômée. Et puis,
thank you very much for your invitation. It's a great pleasure to come back to Caen. After 2 years, I've graduated now, and I'm very happy to tell you this story within the framework of the chair, which was supported by the chair. I would like to tell you the story of a meeting in the Amazon region, and it's often a very striking story when you meet with indigenous people. And I really wanted to show this meeting in France to contribute to make it more well known. So I had the pleasure, the honor to travel in the Equator region of the Amazon as part of my studies. And this is the people of Amazon, which is close to extinction in the equatorial region of the Amazon. So here, you know, this is the Equatorian Amazon region. This is a multi-nation, so 13 different nations, indigenous nations, are recognized by the states with specific rights. And in light blue, in the Amazon part of the equator, you see this. So this indigenous territory is part of the Sapara, is a Sapara people's territory, and their territory was recognized. Now there are about 500 individuals, and only 3 people talk their language, their historical language. So very soon the language will disappear. So it was a very strong meeting with these indigenous people, a very strong connection with the earth, and the fact that knowing that these people will end up disappearing, I really wanted to give them the floor, to give them a voice. And of course, I come from a world which is totally different from theirs. The idea I had when I went into my master's course is to invite somebody from of my age group, a young Sapara person, to invite them in Normandy. I told my story to Emily, and then we created a student collective with a mentoring project within my master's course, and this emerged thanks to the support of the Normandy Chair for Peace. Atutara means culture. So we was a group of 7 students at the campus. This was in 2019, 2020, 2021. These were the years of the pandemic, but we managed to do several things, many things. Thanks to the chair, we created a sound exhibition, an immersive exhibition to really show all of their cosmogony, all the threats also that this culture is facing. And because, of course, indigenous peoples are offering alternatives to our way of life, to our culture, our consumerist, our consumption-based culture. So this was just an exhibition that lasted for a few days. But this exhibition is now going around Brittany, in the Côte d'Armor department of Brittany, and we have the project of getting a young person, the Yari, who had come within the forum, the Normandy for Peace forum. This project will come back. I will tell you more about it. This was during the COVID times. And then during the lockdown, we also created an educational kit for students for second cycle, for higher cycle students, for the with the Sapara, the people of Sapara, the notion of cosmogony, interculturality, cross-culturality, and many other concepts. So in order to really understand and come to grips with these indigenous cosmogony and the transdisciplinary approach, and having an overall view of the indigenous cosmogony. So this was created by the Normandy Chair for Peace. It's a very nice project, a very nice kit. So of course the COVID phase went through that, then we graduated, and I wanted to continue with this adventure. I wanted to continue with these very concrete contributions, which is why last year I went back to the equator and to the equatorian part of the Amazon, and I wanted to reinforce this with the other stakeholders, and we created the association on a plant from the Amazon, an Amazon plant that we consume in order to have a link with the ancestral knowledge. So the values, so listening to indigenous people's voice, and of course promoting their values, knowing that their struggle has a lot to do with what we're doing here now. So we want to really convey their voice, convey their message. We want to support their struggles for the protection of the living earth and the defense of indigenous rights. We want to raise awareness on environmental challenges, and it's so important to really listen to them and to educate on these topics and raise awareness on these issues. So for the past year, this exhibition has traveled to the University of Tours, thanks to my colleague from the University of Tours, to the University of Saint-Brieuc. We created a pedagogical tool in order to really mention, to highlight the importance and the links between what the indigenous people have to tell us, as well as the relation with our way of life here. And of course, this meeting here, I wanted to show you here a photo of the young people that will come to France in November. So very soon, we will welcome a delegation of 4 young people from the equatorian part of the Amazon that represent different peoples. 2 young people from Samara, Sapara, and another one from another nation, and they will represent their own cultures. And we will have intercultural meetings. We will organize a meeting around a nation of commitment. What does it mean to be an indigenous person in the equator part of the Amazon? And we need to take into account their point of view. So I would like to thank the chair once again that really enabled us to really promote this project and create it. And now the seeds have been sown, and now the project has emerged, and now in November this dream will come true. So this is very concrete, very practical. I don't want to talk on behalf of other people. They will be able to talk themselves, to express their voice and their opinions. Thank you very much. All of this is thanks to the Normandy Chair for Peace. So thank you very much.
Bon, quelle fierté d'avoir des élèves et des anciens élèves
We are so proud of having students and former students that really contribute so much to these projects. Agathe actually contributed to a radio podcast in which she explains that through dreams, the Sapara people connect through collective meetings, how they interpret dreams. So Agathe, you have all my congratulations, all my recognition, and I wish you really a lot of success with this association. I think, Lolita, this is an example of humility, intelligence, and inspiration we can have with Agathe. Thank you very much. We had the idea of making these pedagogical kits, the idea of indigenous peoples and resistance. This was also part of a course that we created. The idea is that we could create these kits and they could be launched in different high schools, notably in Normandy, because students want to have these knowledge, this new knowledge. This could be studied in the language classes, in the different sessions, and during the last years of high school. And so we are actually launching an appeal to the different boards of education, and the French Polynesia, New Caledonia, and many others. There is another highlight that we organize through this Indigenous Peoples Line. It is through the dialogue, intergenerational dialogue with Indigenous peoples. We wanted young people to meet online with representatives of Indigenous peoples, and they're all available online on the website of the chair. We organized with representatives from Guyana and New Caledonia, and I'm very happy to meet with them. And later on, I will give the floor to my colleague who moderated these discussions. She will talk to us more about this. What comes out of this is that we are not educated, we know nothing, we have a lot to learn. So first of all, I would like to give the floor to Adrien COUMANS, who is a co-founder of the Lenape Center, which is based in New York, and which works at the dissemination of the Lenape culture, a First Nation of a territory which goes beyond the territory of New York, and they've been here in these territories for the past 12,000 years. I'm immensely delighted to give the floor to Adrien COUMANS. Joe Baker is not here, but is also co-founder of the Lenape Center by his side. So Adrien COUMANS, you have the floor.
Bonjour. Je suis désolé de pas pouvoir
Good morning. I'm sorry I cannot share this small speech with you in French. I have wrote it with Joe last night, during the night, 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, and it's not been translated into French. And also, I've not been actually living here since 1980, and I cannot speak French. I'm sorry.
With the history of the land that the Morgan
Have
is
a small
on.
film.
It's a story of a visionary, a tribal elder, Nora Thompson Dean, who dedicated the entirety of her life to the preservation and the sharing of Lenape culture.
This exhibition consists of 2 parts: an installation of objects in the historic rotunda, including photo albums, letters, musical scores and drawings, and plantings in the Morgan garden of plants important to the Lenape. This exhibition came out of the Morgan's work with the Lenape Center on a land acknowledgement.
The Lenape Center was founded in 2009 with the mission to continue our presence, Lenape presence, in the ancestral homeland, Lenape-Hockey. And to me, this is a beautiful example of how one can activate and create actionable steps to extend the meaningfulness and the purpose of a land acknowledgement, to move it beyond just the performative and make it real.
Joe had the vision to really think about how the plants could speak to both the history and the contemporary presence of Lenape people. We wanted to give the plants a head start, so we started them early at Farm Hub in containers. And it's the sesapsync corn, there's a Nanaco squash, and there's some amaranth, and then there's a few varieties of beans as well.
And going back to Nora, the Lenape corn, which you will find planted here, the sesapsync, was actually carried in her family, her mother's family, from the ancestral homeland all the way west, and then returned 4 years ago through our partnership with Hudson Valley Farm Hub. And now it's growing and thriving in its native soil once again.
Seeds are kind of like time machines in a way, where embedded within the seed is the past, generations and generations and generations of people saving seeds and passing them. And then there's also the future piece, which is what is it going to grow into? Will we be able to harvest seeds from it? Will we be able to save seeds and pass those on?
Part of Nora's work is that she made a number of visits to Lenape-Hoking in the 70s and 80s to meet with people who were interested in the Lenape. I see this exhibition as a way to welcome her and to honor the work that she did fully in a museum space.
And it's a profound moment for museums in general, because the Morgan Library and Museum is the first to open its doors to Lenape people.
Nora clearly saw the continual practicing and sharing of culture as a way to honor those who had come before her and to also maintain and nourish creativity. So that's very much in keeping with what the Morgan is doing now.
Manatan, Manahataan, the place where wood is gathered to make bows, l'endroit où le bois est récolté pour faire des arcs. It's an ancient land. Lenape-Hoking is a homeland that goes back thousands of years. Lenape-Hoking includes New York City, all of New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, the Hudson Valley, New York, western Long Island. It's an enormous homeland, and one that has only now begun to be recognized beyond
recording in progress,
beyond the rooms of academia, of anthropology. Normandy Chair for Peace held a gathering in the Lenape territory at Mohonk House. This conference created the conditions that enabled us as Lenape Center to further refine our work and begin to publish some of what we had been thinking about. I am an adopted member of the white turkey fugate family of the Lenape. I have been for a long time. My work really began as a child in this field, and I have been at this for over 30 years. And finally, we are beginning to see traction. We're beginning to see an audience, a response, an engagement that really can begin to align with what we had hoped would have happened decades ago. Lenape Center has the mission of continuing Lenape hawking through community, culture, the arts, towards eventually the creation of a cultural center. We were founded by elders of the Lenape for the purpose of continuing a homeland. So think about that for a moment, that continuing a homeland isn't simply an idea that has been brought from Europe of real estate, of territory that can be owned, that can be purchased. Homeland is home. It is life-giving. We are determined to return the presence of the Lenape and bring light to the invisibility and the erasure of the Lenape people that has been the result of a genocide, an unrecognized genocide, yet undeniable. Imagine for a moment a future where people will no longer have even a memory of, for example, the Amazon rainforest and its many indigenous nations. Imagine if in 1867, only 900 French people had survived the effects of colonization, war, and destruction. This is exactly what the Lenape endured. Fewer than 900 individuals made it to Indian territory, now known as Oklahoma. Those 25 or so families survived over 250 years of forced removal from the Northeast into present-day Oklahoma. A period of colonization that began in 1609 with the Dutch West India Company, whose mission was profit by any means, by any cost. It was actually the Dutch East India Company that had arrived seeking to identify resources to bring back to the European market. Today, however, there are 15,000 members of 3 U.S. federally recognized Lenape nations in Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and 2 nations in Ontario, Canada. There were only, in total, about 1,000 surviving Lenape by the mid-19th century. But think for a moment of the size of the homeland, from the northeastern state of Delaware to the Catskills in New York State, to all of present-day New Jersey, a third of Pennsylvania, up to, well, including all of New York City and western Long Island. It was an incredibly vastly populated homeland, as evidenced today by the fact that there are still hundreds of names, of place names, that reference Lenape villages and communities. Cities like New York and Philadelphia once held incredibly diverse and whole ecosystems where thousands of villages existed connected through kinship and economic ties. Lenape civilization is ancient and has endured. The Lenape language comprises of Unami and Munsee dialects, ancient language of the Algonquin family tree. This is reflected by the fact that Lenape have always been known as the grandfathers and the peacemakers among many nations. The wars and destruction brought to the Lenape were European in origin and incredibly destructive in their means of turning indigenous nations against others. An entire ecosystem and civilization were almost made extinct through ecocide and genocide under Dutch, British, and US domination, with the blessing of legal frameworks provided by the churches of Europe. Take a moment to imagine the entire ecosystem with pillars of tree species such as ashes, basswood, beech, birch, black gum, cedar, cherry trees, chestnut, cypress, elms, fir, hemlock, hickories, hornbeam, magnolias, maple, oak, pines, poplars, spruces, sycamore, tamarack, tulip, walnuts. They held thousands of years of uninterrupted growth with enormous trees shading interconnected communities of life, all living in symbiosis. There were, in addition, sophisticated agricultural practices of fruit orchards, and kilometers of corn, squash, and beans sustained vastly populated, uninterrupted villages. Today, we are beginning to see the recognition of pre-colonial territories through movements such as land acknowledgement and welcoming to country. Territories are not only pre-colonial, they have existed and continue to exist despite colonization. The Lenape laws that have been in place are clear. Many of these laws are also observed by physics, astronomy, biology, as they affirm the architecture of the interconnection of life. Historians still today, when they begin to tell of this history, begin with the assumption that the first laws were brought over by the colonists, when in fact the laws have never left, have always been. Everything in nature has a spirit and should be given thanks, gifted to, and ask permission before taking from it. Take care of our Mother Earth. Mother Earth gives us all we need to live. We are all relatives. Respect all relations. Take care of our relatives. Think good thoughts when we speak. Everyone has an ability to heal. Don't be greedy. Do not take more than what is necessary to live. As the world continues to suffer the consequences of profit by any means, it has already left in its wake the destruction of centuries of ecosystems and the genocide of thousands of indigenous nations. There is a principle that has never been recognized by Western political, economic, and religious systems, a principle that is still held by many traditional peoples. All things in nature have a spirit. Every tree, rock, raindrop, blade of grass has a spirit. Everything is alive in its manifestation of creation and of a living vision. As consciousness permeates all of Earth, everything has a right to exist by the fact that it exists in the first place, that it was created. Our work at Lenape Center is not preservation, it is about culture. This is a responsibility of generations made to other generations, to the future of transmission and transformation. What is your responsibility to the next generations? Beyond anthropocentrism, what is your commitment to the future of all life? The profit-driven world economy is based on rendering life lifeless and replacing real relationships with transactions. One cannot simply render a forest lifeless just because profit tricks us into validating its murder. As a living entity, disrespecting its life and purpose has real consequences. And scientists have been warning us of these consequences for decades. Indigenous peoples have been warning the world of these consequences for centuries. And we are at the beginning of these consequences revealing themselves, because ultimately so many cultures have lost the sacred or respectful bond with Mother Earth. For a long time, centuries, the destruction of Earth has been led and allowed by the framework of Christianity and its economic siblings, where at the center of the universe is man and profit. It's time to repair the understanding of consciousness and of life. All life, all beings have a spirit, are alive, and deserving of a real relationship. This is the structure of existence on Earth. Consciousness makes all life possible. The time for human self-centeredness in all matters and actions which we mentally justify in anthropocentric hierarchies such as economy, religion, politics, education has now expired. There is only Earth. Heart, compassion, balance have ceased to be spun into life and into renewal, and people no longer feel an obligation to honor Earth's true role as the life giver, respectfully following her natural cycles. The overwhelming obligation is profit at all costs. That cost includes our collective future. Phrases such as resilience, preparedness, and international action to mitigate the impacts of climate change and global warming have become flat, as we human beings should not act as if we are inconvenienced guests in a place that is hostile to us, as we try to limit our exposure to suffering, all the while maintaining our irresponsible ways. There is only Earth, and we are completely inside her womb. We are all alive only because we are living her life. So where do we go? We have to envision the world we wish to see, that future generations have a right, and we have to envision that world for them. We have to make it so. But what will life look like? We have to seek this vision and share this vision and work towards this vision. But it can't be only a human-derived vision. It is one manifested in relationship with Earth. What is this vision? And for the generations to come, what are we envisioning? What is the vision that Earth is giving us? How do we begin to give back for the millions of years of life she has given? What world could we generate when we are giving back instead of only taking? This is not only a philosophical question, it is the only way forward that we see. Wanishi. And just wanted to share a big Wanishi. Thank you, Emily. The entire effort of the Normandy Chair for Peace, really elevating what's possible. And we hope to see much more of this work come about. And it's only possible because of enormous efforts and commitment and drive from you and from others who make it possible. So, Wanishi.
Merci beaucoup, Adrien COUMANS. C'est à mon tour d'être émue parce que vous avez évoqué en fait tout ce qui
Thank you so
m'émeut.
much. This was so moving. You've been dealing with such moving points about the rights of indigenous people. And, you know, this is so much important to deal with the earth, with nature. I think law should reflect this dynamic. And moreover, it is extremely intelligent, smart to listen to you and to listen to what you explain in such a deep way. And it is connected to sovereignty, self-determination of people. And you've also been explaining how your people have been dealing with that, you know, permanent fight of indigenous people to protect their lives and also their, you know, global way of living. So I would like to thank so much Émilie Gaillard for this fantastic adventure and also to continue the roadmap of the indigenous people definition. It is really excellent. And when Emily introduced to me to create peace with people, and she was asking to, you know, work with her, and then I said, well, this is great, of course. It's so much important in terms of values, the connection with nature, the connection with the earth, and you know, we've been thinking about all these possible directions to develop together on this topic. So in that framework, and also fulfilling all the indigenous people's rights, together with Émilie, we wanted to create a dialogue, to create this dialogue with peace with the earth, and explore as well the several ecosystems and also all the explanations of that theme, I mean, that topic. So harmonization with the all the living beings. So it is also this cross-generational act in order to live together and also to come back to all these concepts. So we've been talking about peace, but also the right of self-determination. So during the meetings we had in 2021, we had during this Navajo meeting, we've been talking about self-determination. And that was so much, you know, important because it is connected not only to human beings, but also to nature, which is around us, the ecosystem, the resources, nature by itself. So this is exactly how self-determination is being creating. So we need to really fulfill, you know, all these topics. So peace with the earth is so much important in order to deal with self-determination of people. So it is linked to the cosmos and the universe, the ecosystem, the land, the resources. It's the dynamic of cosmos. And I also wrote this article about the ethics on the environment, and it is exactly what I mean. So of people is of course connected to these different options, and these right is connected to the cosmos. So first, the right of self-determination of indigenous people. And I would like to actually come back to that because we had actually the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which states that indigenous peoples freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. So they still are struggling
in Geneva, still now, in order to fight for the acknowledgement of their rights. So this is still recognized with self-determination, and it is a bit limited. So it is an historical process, the adoption of the UN Declaration. And it is really that topic. You have a process which is not ended yet because they're still not recognized as sovereign entity, which they're asking for. In terms of self-determination, we have so many experts here. So we have a lot of lines of research in order to have the respects of living beings and future generations. So as Emily Gaillard points out, the time has come for transformation and a return to complex thinking, a new legal epistemology, a new legal paradigm. These transformations must be carried out with indigenous peoples, on the one hand, in respect of their right to self-determination, which I mentioned before, in respect of their existence as a people, and in consideration of their recognized experience and knowledge to ensure peace with the earth. So it is extremely important. It is here a key point, which has emerged from all our work and exchanges we have carried out with the chair and representatives of indigenous people. So this is still in that way of thinking, in that acknowledgement. So we have all of a series of aspects around those, that knowledge and their practices. So, valuing indigenous knowledge means supporting its transmission and practice. It means supporting the recognition and respect of indigenous mode of governance, institutions, jurisdictions, territories, and cultural heritage, as well as sacred sites, language, and so on. This is why it is key and urgent to ensure their participation in all decision-making processes that involve them at all levels on a day-to-day basis. So this is the spirit in which we have attempted to carry out various activities under the indigenous peoples line. So I think really we'll carry out so many projects. So let's get into, the most important activities. First point, peace with peoples, as it was explored in the context of intergenerational encounters, with the intervention of Mohawk leader Kenneth Deere at the summer university, with the cycle of webinars to the right to self-determination of indigenous peoples, and with the participation of the chair in the events organized in Geneva on the occasion of the visit of the Chef-Levi General in 1923 to the League of Nations to ensure, so in 2023, to the League of Nations to ensure respect for the sovereignty of the Haudenosaunee. All the items mentioned here are online, and all their items about the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the anniversary of the Levi's general visit to Geneva was already online, and I'm really delighted. The sub-axis, Peace on Earth and the People of the Earth, explored in the field of transitional justice with indigenous peoples, so with all these connections, which aims to repair both peoples and the territories that have been victimized, complementing the activities of the chairs, transitional and environmental justice. Indigenous peoples have their experience of peace. They have their own institutions as peacemakers, and also such, of course, the Lenape and the Haudenosaunee. We had the opportunity to discuss the notion of peace with members of the Haudenosaunee Confederation, women as well, and we had the occasion to deal with peace with Kenny from Nagaland in India. the SADC area of peace with the earth, taking care of the earth to ensure establishing harmony with will explore during the intergenerational dialogues at the Université d'été, namely with the contribution of Eric Julien on Kogi knowledge and Marianne Wallet Abouga-Craig on the Amara research projects with the multidisciplinary worldwide project. The notion of peace with the earth, caring for the earth, listening to the earth, was also nurtured by a side event organized at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues around indigenous legal systems and their interconnected, holistic approach to health. So some of these activities will be presented to you by Laetitia Braconnier, Agathe, and of course, all our colleagues. So, in May 2022, I joined the chair. We have conducted 6 intergenerational dialogues with Eric Julien, David Foreman, Luis Miguel Letricia, Braconnier Moreno, and a lot of intergenerational dialogues. So coming back to dialogues, namely, shall we see on the screen, please, all this? So since May 2022, we have conducted 6 intergenerational dialogues. The videos are online. And the last 3, we have also published in French the main extracts of our exchanges. So 2 dialogues with Delphine Fabrelauson and Tupa Lunes from Nuba Guarani people in Brazil, so the 30th of May, and then the 15th of July, dialogue with Delphine Fabrelauson and Tupa Lunes with the second part, then September, dialogue with Leron Rebus and Dijon Komapu from Wana people in Suriname, co-hosting with Lori Farfataria, then November with Margarita Vargas Lopez, that was November 22 from Chile, indigenous people, and 16th of December, dialogue with N.K. Kenny from the Sumi people of Nagaland in India. So we would like to take this opportunity to warmly thank the interpreters who worked with us in helping us to translate their words lively. It's, as Agathe says, a way to, to be with them and also to raise their voice about their struggles. So coming back to some elements of their dialogue. So what about peace with people during the Page Tupa Lunes from Guarani people who were alerted on the cultural genocides and the other indigenous peoples of Brazil, which were facing at that time under Bolsonaro's government. I was really struck by their constant search for land to live on, as as they are regularly evicted under threat from the lands where they settled after being dispossessed of their ancestral territory. So they can stay sometimes 2 or 3 years still being threatened. So it is undermining the right to life in all its dimensions. So in their cosmovision, the Mbaya Guarani refer to the earth without evil, idest, the earth in peace, in harmony. But spaces of earth and peace and harmony in Brazil are extremely rare. And also in India, I was particularly impressed by a Sumi woman from Nagaland. We met her in New York at the UN, and she is woman of peace. All our actions are part of peace to protect children from human trafficking, to ensure women's rights to decision-making in the villages and women's right to land in a context of customary law where villages, councils are governed by men and land is passed on to men only. By dint of her wisdom, with determination and exchange, she succeeded in getting women to take part in her village council, and she works on a daily basis to educate the new generation, teaching the value of the land and learning about life and nature. She's also emphasized the fundamental historic and current role played by Naga women. She explained that her people believe in the concept of friendship, harmony, and non-violence. So she is really connected to her territory and all the products connected to it. Well,
Elle a également, et ça m'a beaucoup intéressée, donc elle a souligné
Of
le
course, you
retour
can
davantage
find on
historique
the
et actuel
internet
joué
this
par les femmes
interview.
Gaillard dans le maintien de
She
la paix. Elle explique
said,
notamment, par rapport à ce concept, elle dit,
highlighted
nous, on n'a pas ce
the
concept de paix,
historical
mais notre peuple
role
croit au
of
concept
women
d'amitié,
in keeping
d'harmonie, dans la
peace,
non-violence,
maintaining
et
peace.
ces
She explained
principes
that
sont
her
utilisés
people
dans la
believes
résolution des
in the
conflits.
concepts of friendship,
À
harmony,
cet
and
égard, elle
nonviolence,
insiste sur
and these
l'importance du
principles
rôle
are
des
used to
femmes pour la
resolve
préservation de la paix.
conflicts.
Et ce
In
n'est pas
these
la
respects,
première,
she
c'est vraiment
expresses the
Gaillard
importance
ou
of
presque
women's role in
identique
preserving
dans
peace.
les citations
Women are
avec les
important
femmes au
agents in
sonné,
bringing
Gaillard
stability to
mentionné.
family life,
Elle
in
indique
protecting and
les femmes sont
promoting
des agents importants
reconciliation
car elles
and
apportent la
peace,
stabilité
even
dans
in
la vie des
traumatic or
familles, dans
very
la
difficult
protection et la
situations.
promotion de la
So many women
réconciliation,
have been
de la paix,
peacemakers
même dans des situations
since
traumatiques ou très difficiles.
time
Les femmes
immemorial,
soumises sont des faiseuses de
even
paix depuis les
in
temps
very
immémoriaux.
difficult
Et donc,
situations.
ce n'est pas un hasard, en fait, si les femmes autochtones sont les premières
So
victimes des
you
violences,
see,
car ce sont elles, en fait, qui
all
soutiennent la
these
culture
women,
et la
indigenous
paix au
women,
sein de
are
leur communauté.
victims of violence, the first ones of
D'autres
being
exemples,
victims,
éléments dans le
because they
sous-accès avec la
support
terre,
peace.
tous ont partagé l'existence
Other
de savoirs
elements in
traditionnels qui
sub-access
permettaient de
peace with the
préserver le
earth, they
vivant
all share the
et les
existence of a
menaces
traditional
et les
knowledge,
anciens
enabling the
invités
preservation of living
qu'aujourd'hui
things
des
and
menaces
living
pèsent sur
beings,
ces
but also
savoirs
the
à
threats
cause de
currently
menaces qui pèsent
hanging
sur leur
over
territoire,
this
usurpation,
knowledge due to
contamination,
threats
sur leur
to
mode de
their
gouvernance qui ne
territories
sont
or
pas reconnus par
usurpation,
les États, des menaces qui pèsent
contamination,
sur la langue
to their
porteuse
modes
de
of
ces savoirs.
governance not recognized by
Donc c'est
states,
essentiel.
and to the language bearer of
Nkakeni
this
s'est également
knowledge.
référé à leur savoir en termes de santé, mais aussi en
N.K.
termes
Kenny
d'indicateurs, cette fois pas
referred in
juridiques, mais
particular to the
écologiques,
knowledge in
avec une
terms of
plethora
health, in
d'indicateurs
terms of
écologiques dans leur
ecological
culture.
indicators.
Bien que ces
You have
savoirs
all
sont
of a
en érosion,
range of
dans le cas de
indicators.
Nkakeni, ils se transmettent et se pratiquent encore parce
For
qu'ils ont encore un
Nkekeni,
mode
for example,
d'autogouvernance
it
qui est
is
respecté par
still
les
present
États
because they
indiens
have this
et parce
self-governing
qu'ils ont
method
encore
which
un
is
droit au
fulfilled
terre.
by
En
the Indian
l'absence de droit au
state.
terre, il n'y a plus de
And just
transmission
because
de
they
ces
have
savoirs.
really
Ce
that
n'est donc pas le
right
cas, par
to
exemple,
the
des
earth.
Kawashkas du Chili ou encore des Amazirs du
It is
Maroc,
not
qui
the
sont
case
privés
for
de leur
Kawashka in
identité et de
Chile
leur
or the
terre
Amazigh in
et qui luttent pour
Morocco
la
who have been
préservation de leur
deprived
langue.
of their land
La
and
langue,
are
vecteur de
fighting to preserve
l'identité
their
et des savoirs qui
languages,
la soutiennent.
the
La
vector
langue
of
est
their
des
identity
vecteurs
and the
aussi des
precious
lois de la
knowledge that
nature,
underpins
tous
it.
transmis par
So
la langue.
language is
Les
also connected
Kawaskars
to the
étaient baptisés
laws, to
nomades des
nature.
canaux austraux, enfin
And
imaginez les
Kawasker,
nomades des canaux
once
austraux,
nomads
c'est
of
une
the
connaissance
Thousand Canals,
exceptionnelle.
are now
Les Autochtones sont
landless
dépourvus
and
de
landless in
territoire maritime
Chile.
et terrestre.
They have an
Ils luttent
incredible
pour la préservation de
knowledge.
leur langue, parlée cette fois par 8 locuteurs. Donc on n'est pas
They are
très loin de ce
fighting
qui se
for the
passe en
preservation of their
Amazonie
language,
brésilienne,
spoken by
comme
8
l'indiquait Agathe.
speakers. So,
Ils luttent pour
not
la
far
restitution
from
de leur
what
patrimoine
happened in
culturel
Amazonia,
éparpillé
as
dans
Agathe
différents
said.
musées
They are
et des
fighting for
collections privées
the
du monde entier.
restitution of their cultural heritage,
Donc
scattered in
c'est
museums and private
ce dialogue avec
collections all over the
Margarita Vargas
world.
Lopez, Kawashka,
So,
a été
we
retranscrit
have
aussi sur le site de
added
la chaire. Il y a
that
beaucoup de liens
dialogue with
avec des
Margarita
éléments sur
Vargas
les droits
Lopez,
humains
and it
qui
is
ont été
still
donnés
on
dans les
our
Kawashkas, mais aussi
site.
sur des
You
chants
have a lot of
Kawashkas
connections
recueillis par
with
le
the human
linguiste
rights
Christos Claris,
Kawashkars,
des
but
liens
also
justement sur la
Kawashkar
paix
songs
rêvée auquel
collected by
appelle notre
linguist
consistance
Christos
pour la
Claris and
protection
the
des
images of
langues
Commandant
autochtones,
Cousteau
et aussi
and
les
his
dires
family
du
home
commandant Cousteau
when
chez sa
our
famille,
interview was
alors qu'elle n'avait
just
alors que 5
done
ans.
5
Donc
years
c'est
ago.
vraiment un bel entretien. Je vous invite à consulter. Quant
So
à
this is
Amina
really a
Amarek, que j'ai eu
beautiful
le bonheur de rencontrer à
interview.
New York et de retrouver à 2
What about
reprises
Amina
aux
Amarek,
différentes sessions
whom I
d'Intention
had
Unie sur les
the
droits des peuples autochtones?
privilege
Elle
to
mène
meet
une lutte
in New
insatiable pour la
York
reconnaissance et
and
la
to meet again
préservation
in
de
2
l'identité
occasions?
amazigh et de la pratique de
She
sa
is
langue,
really
le tamazigh.
fighting for
Le
the
tamazigh est un
for
terme qui signifie
Tamajir
à la fois langue,
language.
territoire et femme.
Actually,
D'où la
Tamajir
richesse de cette langue qui montre
is territory language of
l'interconnexion entre la
women.
protection
You
des
have
territoires, la
3
protection des savoirs et l'humain.
meanings.
Les savoirs
So
traditionnels de
you have the
préservation
protection
des
of knowledge, the
écosystèmes sont mis à
protection
mal du fait de l'usurpation des terres et
of
de la
people.
gouvernance des
So
territoires
the
par le Maroc. Donc je
their
renvoie encore
traditional
une fois à
knowledge
notre
of
entretien
ecosystem
et toute
preservation is
l'explication.
being undermined by Morocco's
Ensuite,
usurpation
le
of
rôle
land
d'expérience
and
de Mme Gaillard
governance
a
of
été
its
évoqué.
territories are referred to the interviews. Then a great experience we had with Emily
C'était au
was
sein de l'instance
connected
des
to
Nations Unies sur
the
les questions
transitional
autochtones. Donc l'instance par
justice
exemple des Nations Unies sur les questions autochtones est un
and
organe
indigenous
consultatif
peoples. So
d'ECOSOC qui a été fondée
with
par une
Emily,
équipe qui traite
we had
d'indications autochtones,
the
qui siège
honor actually
à New York et qui
that
se
occasion
réunit
to
pour une
deal with
session de dialogue
indigenous
régional
people's
thématique
rights in New
chaque
York.
année au mois d'avril.
And
Il se trouve
it is a
en
session of
novembre
10 days,
2022,
April each year. November
cette instance donc, a organisé
2022, we had
une
the
réunion
honor of being
internationale d'experts sur
accredited
la
to
justice
take part
transitionnelle et les peuples
in a
autochtones
meeting
auquel nous
of
avons participé
UN
avec Emily.
experts
Donc, je
from
reviens encore sur ces notions.
UNPFEII,
Justice
Permanent
transitionnelle et
Forum
peuples
on
autochtones,
Indigenous Issues. I would like to come back to truth,
victimes
traditional
des violences
justice, and
coloniales non
reconciliation
encore réparées,
mechanisms.
les peuples autochtones
The
sont
meeting
également
held at the
impliqués dans des
headquarters of
conflits
Economic
armés
Commissions
qui touchent leur
in
territoire.
Santiago, Chile.
Ce sont de doubles victimes. En général.
So
Selon les
we
victimes,
have a
elles
lot
viennent
of
de tout l'impact
territories
colonial
a lot of topics. So we have a lot of victims connected to the colonial history and all the victims from conflict. So we are like invisible victims, which are connected to these aspects. So this is why transitional justice is dealing with those rights. So it means that we have all these mechanisms dealing with these rights, which are not appropriate with the indigenous people to give justice, and also try to guarantee the non-repetition of what happened in the past. So very often victims are not considered, and also the answers are not given, and nothing really happens. So in November 2022, as said, we were accredited to take part of those meetings about truth, transitional justice, and reconciliation mechanisms. We were at the headquarters of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean in Santiago, and we, together with members of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, Indigenous and non-Indigenous experts, members of the UN system, representatives of indigenous people from mainland Chile and overseas, representative of Chilean institutions and also academics and indigenous people. So these meetings are held behind closed doors between experts. This time it was open to international observers. They invited indigenous and non-indigenous experts share their experience and analysis around conflict resolution, truth, transitional justice, and reconciliation under international law, which are the obstacles to indigenous peoples' participation, which are the lessons learned from work by the indigenous people, standards, policies for conflict resolution, truth, transitional justice, and reconciliation. Finally, working groups were set up to consider strategies to overcome the obstacles and challenges that arise in transitional justice processes involving indigenous peoples. So with Emily, we were able to present 4 oral and written contributions. You can see here a few people participating. This last picture was before the meeting. We were invited by Mapuche organization to meet them in Santiago. So we had this privilege to, give those 4 contributions. First, education for the future and the need to teach the history of colonization from the perspective of indigenous peoples. So decolonization, then transgenerational dimension of trauma and systemic consequences, and also reinforcing the indigenous people. The need to ensure BRCA participation in the transitional justice process underway in the Central African Republic. And also, we've been commenting the findings of anthropological studies carried out in Guatemala and Colombia on transitional justice processes. Leticia Braconnier Moreno also addressed a written communication to the Secretariat on the valorization of indigenous justice systems in transitional justice processes, referring to the Colombian example. I cannot go back to all the conclusions there in the website, Chair's website, and more fully in the official UNPFIR report, which has taken up some of our recommendations. So first, we want to put into, what is needed is not transitional justice, but sustainable transformative justice with indigenous people, ensuring their participation at every stage of the process. So they stress the need to break down the structural barriers, systemic racism, economic exploitation of their territories that compromised and any transitional justice approach. Emily and I were struck by the testimonies of the Chilean indigenous representatives who were present, who spoke of the transgenerational damage they have suffered, which has never been healed or taken into account. So the absence of reparation for colonial damage and the continuation of their violence. We were also moved by the presentation of Aminata Diallo, brilliant researcher as the defender of the rights of Malese Tuareg and Fulani Peul indigenous indigenous peoples who work in difficult and dangerous conditions to alert us to the urgent need to support indigenous children and ex-child soldiers caught up in the conflicts in Mali, for whom the culture of arms has now imposed itself on their indigenous culture. So it is really a duty to take that into consideration. At the end of the mission, Emily and I decided to pursue the reflections already carried out by Luis Miguel and Leticia Braconnier Moreno in the area of transitional and NEVEU justice. We have been organizing online side event at the UN this year on the question of whether transitional justice can affirm the rights of indigenous peoples. And I'll come back to that later on. Let me now turn to our participation in the 2 UN forums on indigenous issues, the sessions of the Permanent Forum of Indigenous Issues in April 22 and 23, and the session of the UN Expert Mechanisms in Geneva in July 2023. So, Loris Frataria's first mission was an introduction to UN bodies dedicated to indigenous issues, indigenous diplomacy, so an opportunity to establish relationships with the president of the Permanent Forum, the special rapporteur on the rights of indigenous people, Kenneth Deere, Mariam Wallet Aboukri, Amina Babkresh, and all the many others with whom the chair has since carried out numerous activities. So Laurie Frateres shared an account of her mission on the shared website. So on the occasion of that session, which dealt especially with the interconnection between human, territorial, and plant health, Emily and I planned a new session, this time with Leticia Braconnier Moreno, also an expert in indigenous people's rights. With Leticia, we planned a virtual side event on transitional justice and indigenous connection to analyze the extent to which TG enables them to assert their rights. So that was connected to this previous session in Santiago, a side event on transitional justice and indigenous people to analyze how transitional justice enables them to secure their rights. And with Emily, we organized another side event on site at the UN on the links between indigenous legal systems and their holistic approach to health. As for the first event, we chose to involve many representatives of indigenous peoples from Burundi, Mali, Colombia, and Guatemala, as well as the director of the Institut francophone sur la justice et la démocratie, specialist in transitional justice, to talk also about their experiences of transitional justice. So we not only prepared the session with the speakers, but also submitted a draft report of the event, which they approved. So the Arcuaco magistrate Belkis Izquierdo Torres also submitted an article for publication by Cairo on the special justice for peace in Colombia, the participation of indigenous people in this mechanism, how their jurisdiction are taken into account, and the reasons why they consider the territory to be a victim that must be repaired with presentations of cases submitted to this jurisdiction. The parallel event held in hybrid mode.
C'était un événement donc très privilégié que nous avons tenu le 25 avril 2023.
On April 25, 23, on indigenous legal systems and their links with a holistic approach to health, coordinated by Émilie Gaillard and myself. The aim was, to report the contribution of indigenous legal systems to the protection of human health, services, and the planet. Curtis, I would like to first to explain to you why I was really so much fascinating. So, how to be part of the earth, the cosmos, and land right. And the cosmos right it is exactly how you would create your space and how to have a spiritual entity which would be connected to your life. So it is so much, important to consider that link and how to solve issues. So how, you would then create disease through the non-respect of those laws. So it is the violation of the land, the violation of the right, and how to have the shaman helping you to reestablish this spiritual connection. So you would have a lot of actions to restore that space and also the harmony of the person. So it is extremely important. So this event, as said, was also the occasion to deal with the indigenous rights systems to protect the values, knowledges, in order to work with their governance. In this occasion, Curtis Uniga of the Lenape Center did us the honor of opening this event with a recognition of Lenape Hoking, Lenape territory, the Lenape language, the first time such a Lenape recognition had been achieved at the UN. We were treated to brilliant and inspiring presentation by Lenape Center founding members Adrien Cosmos and Joe Baker, Christopher Sudol, Rapa Nui representative Valeria Pakahariki, NASA Colombia representative Maria Violet Media Quiscu, Andreas Kelly of the Australian Aboriginal and Nicholas Robinson, co-chair of the chair. Here's a sneak preview of this magnificent event with a video of Samak Sultan. And he was, invited by the chair, and he stayed there to support with different documents. So the event will shortly be broadcasted on the chair's YouTube channel in English, French, and Spanish. And then, yeah, I can launch it.
Je suis Émilie Gaillard, coordinatrice générale et responsable scientifique de la chaire d'excellence CNRS Normandie pour la paix.
I'm Adrian COUMANS. I am non-indigenous. I am the grandchild and the great-grandchild of European immigrants, embarked on a journey to try to understand more, to cure the settler mind.
I'm going to speak in my native language first. I apologize if there is no interpretation. He kulumasi mahash namaho, duluensi alushi oquis, sakima na lenapeok, nululundum muhanao, ilipaeko, manahata ok lenapeoki.
I especially want to acknowledge that we're in Lenape-Hoking and the historic moment that this represents, where I think for the first time in the United Nations we have heard the language of the Lenape spoken.
Existe un reconocimiento y debe existir un reconocimiento de los sistemas y que deben interactuar. Eso nos permite un autorreconocimiento, pero un respeto también de las jurisdicciones especiales que tenemos entre pueblos indígenas, ya que en Colombia existe un poco más de 115 pueblos indígenas, más unos.
So this is a special recognition that we have obtained in that occasion.
Today are just that. They are steps toward creating a more holistic and healthy system that reflects all of these missing elements along with the peoples of the world.
La chaire Normandie pour la paix et ses partenaires, donc le Lenape Center ici présent, le Centre Cultura Mapuche Peloncharo, le Conseil international du droit de l'environnement AICEL, Semilla Voyonqua et le projet Aramat, sommes très honorés de partager avec vous.
So we were present in order to share together with you this parallel in the framework of the permanent mission in that meeting room, which was still important for the respect of self-determination and also the sovereignty of the nation.
no son para nosotros, somos nosotros para que el otro sepa quiénes
This
somos,
is really
tiene que llegar.
key for
Hoy día debemos hacer
all
un llamado
our
fuerte.
presentation,
Esta tierra puede vivir sin
and we need
nosotros.
to get to
El
those
permiso que
final
tenemos nosotros
steps.
para vivir aquí es con responsabilidad. ¿Qué vamos a aportar a ella? Cada uno de los articulados que hay aquí están hechos desde el conocimiento de los pueblos ancestrales.
This is the recognitions of people, the acknowledgement of people.
Lenape Hocking, the Lenape homeland, through community, culture, and the arts. We are committed to seed the ground with Lenape consciousness for future generations. It is important to note that the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues has only recently recognized this ancestral homeland of the Lenape.
We have a responsibility, and I hope this body considers that when engaging in dialogue about the rights of indigenous people.
Résolument, ce side event va donner la parole à des peuples autochtones qui vont nous permettre de renouveler la
This
vision
side event will give
occidentale, souvent binaire,
the
souvent
opportunity to
simplifiante,
indigenous people
souvent
to express
coupant sur différentes
themselves
approches,
and
que ce soit
also
par rapport à notre
really
observation du
to
monde, par rapport au
highlight
savoir, la façon d'organiser notre pensée,
several
les événements et le
aspects.
système juridique. Je vous souhaite à toutes et à tous un excellent side event.
Access to online counseling and support for elders, and our elders and protecting our elders in our community was really, really important through that process.
Working hard is a natural principle. No human society needs to take credit for that. It's not a man-made idea. Everything, all life, works hard.
Pero lo clave aquí no solo debe ser el pluralismo jurídico, el diálogo intercultural, la articulación de las jurisdicciones, la coordinación y articulación de los sistemas. La consulta previa libre e informado debe ser un referente que nos permita a nosotros avanzar, pero también desarrollar nuestros propios sistemas. Hoy esa articulación, coordinación, debe de transitar del papel a la acción para que haya una relevancia en el sistema de justicia propia que tenemos los pueblos y las comunidades indígenas.
It's time to reverse the table and begin to heal nature, bring back the health of the environment, bring back what we had a meeting yesterday here in the UN, harmony with nature, in which the autonomy and the rights of Mother Earth are not just acknowledged, but our responsibilities, as Curtis has articulated, really need to be in the forefront of understanding our relationship to all that we live with and are part of in the biosphere and the earth.
Donc, merci à tous ceux qui ont contribué et à Sultan Moussadak donc pour nous laisser ce
Thank you so
souvenir.
much
Et
to all of
voilà, ce qui a
you
été
who
souligné, c'est que
contributed to that
les peuples autochtones en fait,
extremely
sont prêts,
moving
ils continuent d'agir, donc ils sont prêts à agir, mais on leur
moment,
laisse pas la
and
place en fait. Même aux Nations
we're
Unies, on ne laisse pas
still
la place. Ça va être le mot
you
de la
know,
fin
in that
avec l'événement
action.
donc, auquel j'ai assisté,
So even in
l'anniversaire
the UN, there's
de la venue
really
du chef
no,
d'escadrille de la Société
there's
des
a
Nations, donc
real
jadis, le
opportunity.
chef
So
Cayuga, donc la Confédération iroquoise des 6 nations, était
this
venu, donc, avait tenté
Cayuga,
désespérément
oh
de se
yeah,
faire entendre auprès
commemorating
du
the visit of
Canada, qui ne
Cayuga chief
respectait pas sa
Descartes
souveraineté et ses terres, au
levy
point qu'il a
to the
décidé
League of
avec
Nations,
son avocat, moi,
and he wanted to defend the
les
sovereignty of
autochtones au
his
Canada
nation.
n'avaient pas le droit
With,
d'avoir leur propre avocat, que leurs droits soient représentés au Canada. Il avait donc un avocat qu'il avait soutenu pour
so the League of Nations
présenter
closed
sa
the door
demande
on
donc,
him,
d'intégration
thereby
à la Société
betraying
des
the
Nations,
national
et puis aussi
law
que
to
son
the
cas soit
indigenous
entendu
peoples
et donc
whose
soit
nations
défendu
were once
au nom du
recognized
droit
as
international.
sovereign,
Donc la Société des Nations ne lui a
notably
jamais
through
ouvert
the
les portes.
signing of historical
Ce n'était pas le cas par
treaties.
contre de la mairie de
So,
Genève en fait, qui est le maire de Genève de l'époque, donc de 1923,
however, the
l'a
city of
laissé
Geneva
prononcer
welcomed
son
him,
discours et depuis donc
allowing him to give the speech
il
he
y a eu
had
une alliance, il
planned
y a eu
for
un
the League of
échange de façon de
Nations.
ceinture d'amitié
And since the
avec
city of
ça s'appelle
Geneva has never
l'encombre
ceased to demonstrate and renew its
avec
support
la ville de
for
Genève qui a
indigenous
été renouvelée
peoples,
aujourd'hui 100 ans après, mais 100 ans après on en est où?
and it
S'il y a
has
eu
been
beaucoup
renewed
d'avancées
1 year
dans la
later. But
reconnaissance
where
des
are
droits
we
des peuples
today?
autochtones, comme le disent les
What are the
Haudenosaunee, ils n'ont toujours
steps
pas,
in
ils
that
sont obligés de
recognition?
s'enregistrer en tant que ONG pour
As
s'exprimer au sein des Nations
Haudenosaunee
Unies.
say, they're
Eux, ce
still
qu'ils souhaitent,
obliged
c'est
to
au moins
be
qu'ils
registered as
s'appartenir en tant qu'État,
NGO
mais d'être reconnus en tant
to express
qu'observateurs
themselves at the
pour
UN. So
participer à
they
l'ensemble
would
des
like to be
discussions pour
recognized
leur
as
bien-être, mais aussi pour le
observers
bien-être
to
de la
participate
planète.
to all the
Donc,
discussions
il y a eu
for
une série
the
d'événements qui a été
well-being
organisée
and the
donc à
well-being of
Genève,
the
par
earth.
la mairie de Genève,
So we
par la
had a
Confédération
series of
Haudenosaunee
events
et
organized
aussi par
in
le centre
Geneva in
GOSIP, un
parallel
centre
with
qui
the
soutient
expert
les peuples
mechanisms on the
autochtones,
rights
qui
of
fait des
indigenous peoples,
traductions, qui a un relais.
with
Donc en
the
fait, c'est aussi une archive des interventions des peuples autochtones au sein de
GOSIP,
l'ONU.
which
Donc, ils ont
is
organisé
actually
plusieurs
an
événements. En février
archive of all
2023, la
the
plantation d'un arbre de la paix,
indigenous peoples
la restitution
events. So
d'objets
they
sacrés
had
Haudenosaunee
in
par le musée
February the
ethnographique
Tree
de
of
la ville de
Peace in
Genève.
Geneva in
En
February
juillet
23 and the return
2023,
of
une
Haudenosaunee
réception
sacred
exceptionnelle au
objects of the
palais Hénard
city
avec
of
des
Geneva,
interventions
but also a
marquantes du
reception
maire de la
at
ville
the
de
Palais
Genève actuel,
Hénard
de
featuring
l'actuel
speeches
d'Escarré, parce que
of the
d'Escarré, c'est
mayor
un titre qui
of
signifie chef,
Geneva, but also
donc du
current
chef
Descapé,
d'Escarré Steve Jacob,
Steve Jacobs
de
and
la
clan
mère de
mother
clan
Louise
Louise Erne.
Hernay, among
Il y a eu
others,
un
with the
renouvellement de
renewal
l'amitié, des échanges
of
de cadeaux,
friendship
suivi
and
d'une
exchange
cérémonie et
of
des échanges à l'arbre de
gifts,
la paix.
followed by an
Le
exchange
lendemain, un événement
ceremony at the
parallèle est
Tree
revenu sur le
of
parcours de
Peace.
Descarré
But
et
then the
les atteintes
following
portées à
day,
la
side
souveraineté
event
haudenosaunee.
revisited
Le soir,
Descarré
à l'issue
journey
de
at
la
the
session du
attacks of
mécanisme des
Haudenosaunee
experts, donc une autre
sovereignty. In the
session de
evening,
l'ONU
at
sur
the
les
end of the
peuples
expert
autochtones,
mechanism
une
sessions,
grande marche
a
des peuples
large
autochtones a
march of
été
indigenous peoples
organisée
was
jusqu'au
organized
quai
to the
Wilson,
Quai
où ensuite a
Wilson,
été
where
inaugurée
an
une exposition
exhibition
photographique, document d'archives intitulée Descarré
an exhibitions of photographs and
1923-2023,
archival documents
défendre
entitled
la souveraineté des
Descarré
Haudenosaunee. La lutte de Descarré,
1923-2023,
donc je vais vous montrer quelques
Descarré in
images,
Geneva,
symbolise
to
celle en fait de
how
toutes les
to
nations autochtones dont la
support
souveraineté et les droits ont
the
été bafoués. Donc, je l'ai
Haudenosaunee
encore, on est
sovereignty.
dans cette situation-là. Il symbolise leur lutte
And
pour retrouver
Descarrés'
leur droit à
struggle symbolizes
l'autodétermination
the
et cette
one of
souveraineté
all
s'ils le
indigenous
souhaitent.
nations whose
Il
sovereignty
s'agissait
and
ainsi d'un
rights have been
événement
violated.
extrêmement important
So
pour
their
la paix avec le
struggle
peuple
to
et la planète.
regain
Un
their
compte-rendu
rights
de
to
tous ces événements a
self-determination
été
and
réalisé. Il
sovereignty
sera prochainement
is so
publié
key.
sur le site
So
de la chaire. Il
there
attend
is
d'être
a
révisé pour certains
report of all
documents
these
par les
events which has been
Haudenosaunee.
produced and will be
Nous avons
published on the
réalisé de
chair's
nombreux
website.
entretiens auprès de Kenneth
So
Gaillard de
it
l'actuel
awaits
d'Escarré qui sont
revision
déjà en ligne
by
et de
the
deux femmes
Haudenosaunee. It
Haudenosaunee
was
donc,
also
qui nous ont donné
conducted.
leur accord
We
donc,
also
cette nuit, donc, qui vont
conducted
pouvoir être
numerous
diffusés, qui
interviews
sont
with
vraiment très riches
Gaillard, current
en
deity Steve
savoir, en
Jacobs, and two exceptional
le
Haudenosaunee
concept de la
women,
paix, aussi
which are
comment
gradually
réparer les traumatismes
being
transgénérationnels dont
uploaded
ils souffrent.
to the
Donc
chair's
maintenant, je vais vous laisser
website.
quelques
So
images.
here are
C'est
a
à ton
few
tour, Maxime.
images. So
Alors, c'est
Maxime,
une vidéo
you
que
have
j'ai
the
faite,
floor.
mais que j'ai pas encore eu l'accord des Haudenosaunee. Donc
So
j'ai
this is a
enlevé
video
le son, il y
I
a
have,
juste cette mini intro
you
et
know,
après je peux stopper des
prepared.
images que j'ai réduites. Donc vous allez voir tous les événements que j'ai cités. Au Palais Hénard à Genève, le chef d'Escarré Steve Jacob. La remise de la ceinture de
So this is Steve Jacobs in
l'amitié.
Geneva.
La mère de clan Louise Erne.
Then the mayor,
Les
Louise
chanteurs avec
Erne,
des chants. Un ancien Haudenosaunee.
all the songs,
La remise de cadeaux.
the gifts.
Donc un side event qui a été vraiment avec beaucoup d'informations faites par la directrice du centre culturel de Woodland.
The
Edith
side
George.
event, which
En fait, dans
has
la
so
vidéo que j'ai
many
reconstituée, elle
information
est la
and
voix
said
off de
with
l'ensemble de
the
la vidéo parce
Woodland
que tous ces discours et
director
toutes ces
Edward George.
présentations étaient juste
In that
exceptionnelles.
video, she is actually the
Donc la délégation des
voice
Haudenosaunee devant les Nations
of
Unies et au départ
in
de la
order
marche des
to
peuples
see
autochtones.
all the
Donc tous les
events which
représentants
took
autochtones qui étaient
place.
présents à la session du mécanisme des experts donc, ont
So you
marché
have all
pour leurs droits
the
et pour ceux des
indigenous
Haudenosaunee.
representatives which were present, and they were there to defend their rights.
Et donc, ils se rendaient au quai Wilson, où a eu lieu cette exposition de photographies, vous voyez.
They were
Le discours donc, de
going
la
to the
directrice du centre
Wilson
culturel de Woodland, des membres de la Confédération.
bridge, and then all the participants.
Le maire de Genève, donc, qui réclamait la réparation des injustices des peuples dont les droits ont été bafoués. Une jeune
The
Haudenosaunee.
mayor of Geneva,
L'inauguration donc de l'événement.
the inauguration of that event.
Le drapeau des Haudenosaunee sur le pont de Genève. La cérémonie.
The flag course,
des échanges en fait, qui avaient lieu autour
the
d'un café, un
ceremony,
poème écrit par Amina Amarek, dont je vous ai déjà
and
parlé. C'est
all
une
the
photo donc, qui date d'il y a 7 ans.
exchanges,
Moi,
and
je suis
then
passée
the
vite, je vais faire
poem which was
en
written.
mode réduit, mais aussi
That was
diaporama.
a picture taken
Et en fait,
100 years
la
ago,
photographie où on
and
voit
this
des
is the
carrés
picture
avec
taken
des
this
représentants
year,
de l'Amérique du
today,
rêve et même
and
des
then you
membres de
can
la
see this
société
carré
d'habitation,
with
mais
all
là,
representatives
dans
of
le
the
système
mayor,
d'habitation. Cette photographie de 1983 en
the
noir et blanc a
municipality
été
of
renouvelée dans cette
Geneva,
amitié
and this picture
et
in
cette
black and
revendication
white
de la
has been
souveraineté et de l'autonomie
renewed
a été
in
renouvelée
that
à cette occasion en
mindset of
2023 avec
friendship
une nouvelle photographie
for
avec tous les acteurs qui
you
soutiennent
know,
la lutte,
in that
notamment
occasion, with a new
Lina de
picture
Genève.
with all
Je
the
vous remercie.
actors
Je sais que c'était un
which
style un petit
are
peu écrit,
you
peut-être un
know,
peu dense,
supporting
mais
that
une session a
fight.
été menée
So
en poste
thank you so
pour
much.
présenter ce qui a
I'm
été fait
really
avec les peuples
all
autochtones
my
au sein de la terre
apologies
et
because
bien
I
sûr
was
avec
really
Émilie, nous aimerions
running a lot.
poursuivre
But anyways, we've been
avoir des projets ensemble.
working a lot, and that was so much moving to work together with Emily. So thank you so much.
J'avais une diapo de la fin. Maxime? Merci beaucoup, en fait.
Eh bien, nous n'avons fait que 2 lignes sur 12. Et,
Perfect. So we have been working the whole morning, but as Leslie said, this is an objective to have the peace with the earth, going beyond all our project, our you know, ideas. So with the Normandy region, we identify the fact that the region of Normandy is the most well known in the world, one of the most well known in the world. So I can confirm that whenever you talk about this chair of excellence for peace, you have an energy which is so much positive of creation and diffusion of that message of peace. So it is a great privilege to have been, you know, piloting with Tommy Oposa and Nicholas Robinson, and really to be able to diffuse that that energy, as you have seen with all the presentations of Michel Prieur, but also Christophe, and all the wonderful presentation of Adrien, Aguette, and Leslie, how much we went forward. So it's not a competition, but we can see how much it is reinforcing. So that line can be transposed with all the, you know, indigenous people. So it is so much important. Michel, you want to take the floor? Please come here. Yeah, I wanted to give one more historical element to your presentation to highlight the fact that at the end of the 19th century, we had a French man who was notary in the Dordogne region, in the Port-Roirac village, and he decided to go to South America, to go to Argentina, Chile as well, and he called himself the King of Patagonia. So the first King of Patagonia is a French, Antoine de Toulens. He was in Patagonia, he was proclaimed king by the Mapuche peoples, and that king actually wrote a constitution, which is the first constitution of Mapuche peoples, which was written by a French person. And then he came back to France. He died, is buried in Tortorac, in the Dordogne region, 30 kilometers from home, from where I live. And each time I have you know, Chilean or people from Argentina, I bring them to see him. And because in Argentina and Chile, at school, you have one chapter dedicated to the French king of Patagonia, considered as probably, you know, crazy, but it makes part of Chile and Argentina. So, there. Thank you.
Comme quoi, on n'est pas à l'abri de surprises.
Great. So we have a lot of surprises. Now, I would like to highlight a few points. First, thank you so much to all of you for this wonderful morning. Well, indigenous people is a very moving part. We have a sacred, line here. So I would like also to acknowledge all my colleagues. So I would like to conclude this morning, and in around 1.5 years, Leslie has been working so much, and then you have seen at the UN the big room we had, so this is a great success, and what Leslie did in 1.5 years is just incredible. So I would like to thank you so much, so continue on that direction and beyond, our perspectives.